Well, hello, America, and welcome to Common Sense. I am Wendy Bell. The tide seems to be turning. The momentum, I don't know, kind of feeling like it's starting to be on our side, the side of actual science, of law and order and justice. And it was just one roll call in the House of Representatives that makes me feel kind of certain of this. Last week, with a vote of 419-0, Congress unanimously supported the declassification of all materials related to the origins of COVID-19. I'm talking everything about the Wuhan lab, everything about the gain-of-function research Dr. Fauci swore under oath he was not involved in, not ever. The bills, the receipts, the emails, all of it. At least we hope. Americans deserve the truth. The big question is, however, can the uniparty afford to ever give it to us? And if they do, who will be the first one thrown under the bus? Well, let's bring in our panel of talk radio hosts from across America to dig into all this. First up is the co-host of the Tim Jones and Chris Arps show on News Talk 101.9 FM in St. Louis, Missouri, Chris Arps. Also with us is the host of Today with Dr. Wendy on KCBQ Radio The Answer in San Diego. Wendy Patrick's also Newsmax columnist. Good to have you back, Wendy. And finally, the host of the Barack Lurie show on AM 870, The Answer out of Los Angeles, Barack Lurie. All right, Wendy, I want to start with you today. This unanimous vote in Congress. I mean, girl, this is unheard of. Democrats and Republicans can agree on nothing, right? But they all say we need to learn the truth about how this whole global pandemic started. So one, why do you think this has happened, right? And two, do you have any confidence we're actually going to get any answers?
Well, I'll tell you, I think it happened because it affects everybody. I mean, COVID wasn't something that really drew down partisan lines. Everybody was affected, either themselves or a loved one. I think you're right. You've given the example, they can't decide what to have for lunch. They also can't decide between something like coffee and decaf. I mean, they are just divided on almost every issue. But how good is it to see they actually came together and held hands across the aisle here in voting for transparency on an issue that impacted each of them personally. That's what makes all the difference. Much of what they vote on, think about it, doesn't impact their lives. That's one of the reasons that citizens are often so critical of government, is that they're so removed from the kitchen table issues that the rest of us grapple with every day, but not this one. And that's why I think you saw unanimous vote.
Wow, you make me feel terrible because I'm way more suspicious than you are. Barack, I want to bring you in here. You know, I wonder if the esteemed Dr. Fauci is maybe feeling the heat a little bit. He said this on CNN when he was asked about the virus escaping from a lab. Exactly how would that have happened? Well, Fauci answered, but it really wasn't the question that he was asked. Barack, listen to this.
One of the things that people maybe don't fully appreciate, that all of the intelligence agencies agree unanimously that this was not engineered. Namely, they didn't deliberately do this to make a bioweapon. Everybody agrees with that. No matter what your prior thoughts were, everybody agrees with that.
Okay, it wasn't a bioweapon, he says. Everybody agrees. It's unanimous. There's no dissent. Sort of like Hunter's laptop being Russian disinformation, right? This makes me super suspicious, too. What about you?
Yes, it has all the earmarks of not being engineered, right? I mean, that's a good phrase. 51 intelligence agency experts. So, look, of course, he doesn't make the distinction between it being engineered on the one hand and being intentionally released on the other. Those are two very different things. You know, the jury's still out whether it was intentionally released. As to whether it was not, it was actually engineered. I mean, all the markers of the virus do show that it was engineered. So this consensus argument doesn't fly in the past. It doesn't fly now. I do think it's fascinating, Wendy, if I might say, that this was a unanimous vote from both Democrats and Republicans. And I really want to know, why is that so? And I concluded that there was only one reason, and that's because it's just a bad look for any Democrat to say, I don't want the information to come out. I would like it to be sealed and not revealed whatsoever. They can't have that. So look, they're going to try to march in front of this parade and say that somehow they're the ones who released all the information about transparency. They were ahead of it somehow, like somehow they were ahead of civil rights, they were ahead of slavery, they were ahead of the Iraq War, whatever it is, they're always ahead of it. And so you'll see they'll take credit for it.
Well, that's interesting. All right, Chris, I want you to jump in here because, you know, Fauci said no gain of function. We didn't do that. Well, we know that he did. He told us the science that we funded only cost a few $100,000. We know it cost millions and millions. So as conservatives, we've screamed for transparency. It's almost shocking to hear the legacy media finally echo the call. Equally stunning, though, network news reporting that the Wuhan Institute of Virology likely double-dipped on us and charged the U.S. government twice for this risky research. Like CBS actually reported that. They've awakened. What's your reaction?
Wendy, one rare area of bipartisanship we've seen in Congress has been in regards to China. You know, last year they passed the CHIPS Act, which was supposed to bring a bipartisan act, which was supposed to bring chip production back to the United States so that we are not dependent on them. You know, as you said, 419-0 in the Senate. It was passed by unanimous consent. I think, and Wendy said it earlier, that everyone in this country and everyone in the Congress has had a loved one or a friend that has either died from COVID or has suffered a serious illness from it. And so I think that's part of the reason why they want to declassify this information. I can't wait for this declassified information to come out, because I think we're going to learn what we already suspect, is that Dr. Fauci paid for this gain of function research in China, and he has blood on his hands and is partly responsible for this worldwide pandemic.
Right on. I think you're absolutely right about that. And I think you just answered the question, who's going to get thrown under the bus first, which is why Fauci's out there making the rounds. Wendy, so as we're talking about this great kumbaya moment, 419-0, right? House Democrats on the Homeland Security Committee unanimously refused to attend a Border Patrol hearing in Texas this week. We're talking Sheila Jackson Lee, Eric Swalwell, Benny Thompson, among the 15 Democrats who just wouldn't go. Thompson said it was clear Republicans would try to politicize the event. I mean, in the category of that's rich, I'm thinking about the January 6th committee. I mean, weigh in here. What are your thoughts?
I'll tell you, this is not an issue that there's anywhere near agreement. Not January 6th, not the border, not so many other of the issues that we debate about every single day on the air. And you know, our listeners really appreciate the value of hearing both sides of this. And if somebody isn't willing to even enter the conversation, whether it's going to the border or watching all of the January 6th footage or considering how many moving parts were involved in that evolving crime scene, that you can't neatly characterize it into any particular box. Somebody that's not willing to look at both sides of that is also not willing to negotiate. And that's why you don't see consensus, and you won't see consensus. What you will see, to borrow a prior analogy, is more people getting thrown under the bus as they refuse to educate themselves on what really is going on at the border and what really went on January 6th.
Yeah. Right. I think it's a good point. And Barack, open borders are purposeful. There's an awful lot of money flowing over and back. The Mexican drug cartels went from making $500 million in 2018 from human smuggling to $13 billion last year. That's from the New York Times. Plausible deniability. The left won't have to defend what it can claim it never saw. I mean, is that the point?
Yeah, I think that is the point. The problem for the Democrats is that there's so much corruption now flowing, not only in Mexico, but flowing from Mexico to the United States, that there are corrupted politicians, that they're paid. Look, we don't know if they're actually paid to look the other way, but I do think that they want so much to have power that they won't mind whether there's this influx of illegal immigrants whom they hope will vote Democrat. And as a collateral consequence, of course, is that we'll have all these drug cartels and fentanyl streaming over the border, and that's an acceptable collateral issue for them. So that's, I think, what's in operation here. They're willing to accept this very bad side effect, but nevertheless, the more important narrative for them and the most important need and agenda for them is to have a lot more illegal immigrants for the purpose of having more votes and perhaps to ruin the infrastructure of the country.
Right. I don't disagree with you. Okay, sit tight, guys.